Okay, so this is just a quick video tutorial to explain how to use my Invader-Format classic ID card template for Zombicide. And I don't have fancy screen capture software, so hopefully you'll be able to see my mouse moving around. I'll try to go fairly slowly so it's easy to pick up. Um, Also, I just woke up, so I might stutter a little bit or mumble my words. So let's get into it. This is the folder as it would appear after it's extracted from the zip that you download. And I'll open it up and get in here. So we have the template in here. We got the README, which is really important to read. I know it's a little bit long, but it really explains things that would be a little confusing if you went straight into the template, maybe, especially the options for each of the different elements. Uh, Then this is just some examples, just to talk about them real quick. So here's a couple card backs. You can see different options for backgrounds. This would be the classic style where each character has their own color background. Um, this would be the red. This style is used on their website for like character bios and stuff. It's just kind of a nice uh, background that kind of mimics how Invader, everybody has the same background. They're not different colors like that, so you could do that as the card back if you wanted to. The rest of these show different things you can do with the other elements on the card. Oh, the other thing you can do with the background is, the original ID dashboards have the regular living survivor on the front and a zombivore version on the back. I call them zombivores. It's probably supposed to be called zombivore, like a zombie survivor, but I don't like that. So let's look at a couple of differences here. This version, uh, we should compare purple to purple, but it doesn't matter. This version has this. The skill list has white box behind it, the same as the classic dashboards do, but it's a little ugly, honestly. So, I mean, the point of making it was to try and make it exactly the way it would look if they had made the cards in this size to begin with. But I like it better without the white box. You can see instead the font is white, so it's easy to see. It's got a little drop shadow. Um, on the right here, we have wounds, uh, and you can increase the number of wounds. So here, like the zombivore has 5 wounds. Um, and the other thing you can change is borders, and you have this black hazard border, or you can have no border, or you can have no border and this yellow hazard stripe to go next to the wound tracker, and that can extend up to however many wounds you have. So those are just some examples. What else you have in this folder is these are just individual images. And I should mention this is from an older version of the template, so the new one's a little improved. I don't know if it shows up in any of these examples, but then we have fonts. These are all the fonts you need for the template to work, and you got to make sure you install these before you use the template. All right, so let's get into it. Opening up the template here in Photoshop. Um, First thing you see is a layer that just explains some things. Most of it's already in the README. So here are the layers over here on the right. This is where I have my layers window. Uh, and they're separated into groups. So let's go over them. The first group on top is this miscellaneous group, and that's mainly that you will have this group off anytime you're saving this. And I recommend saving a separate copy of this every time you make a new character, because otherwise you're going to overwrite the default one. You'll have to download it again if you want a fresh one. So, okay, so what's inside this miscellaneous? We have this guide, which we can turn off, um, an example, um, and print preview. So all this does is add a little kind of clear border back here. Um, well, it's not clear. It's the same color as my Photoshop background, so it won't look good on newer versions of Photoshop. But it's just meant to show what the card will look like after it's cropped and comes back from the printer, or if you're printing it yourself. So we don't need to see any of those, so we'll turn that off. And now let's go over the groups. So we'll start out with background. I'll open this group, and you'll see 3 different things in here. The first one, which is the one we have selected now, is this classic style background, this purple. And how that works is you open that up, and there's 3 things in here. One of them is just a note to explain how to do it. You can always leave that off. The other one is this background layer, which you can see is just gray. And above that, there is this adjustment layer, which just tints that gray background. And you want to match whatever the color the character has in the original dashboards. And I'll show you how I do that at the end. But the way you change the tint is you double click on the adjustment layer, and it opens up this little adjustments box, and you can change the hue, you can change the saturation, you can change the lightness. So between those 3 adjustments you can match any of the colors on the survivors. So that's one thing we can do. Now, if you're not going to use the classic background, you can use that red background. That's the second one here, BG alternate. You don't have to do anything with that. It's just, it is what it is. But if you're going to use this background, you need to change the header font color to white so that it's more visible. I'll show you how to do that in a minute, because I kind of made that easier than just changing the font color. The other thing we have, the other layer we have in backgrounds is this zombivore watermark. This just shows the biohazard symbol that the zombivore dashboards have. So if this was zombivore Amy, I would turn that symbol on. Since it's not, I'll leave it off. And we'll move on to the character art group. So this group is where I would drag in, I would import my character art for whatever character I was making. And it's important that it goes in here because you don't want it above or behind layers that it shouldn't be. So if you put it in here, it'll be in the right order. And I've just got 2 in here. I've got Amy and I've got Zombivore Amy. So we'll stick with Living Amy for now. That's all there is to character art, and we go into borders, and there's a couple options here. So I prefer this black hazard border, but if you want no border, you just hide everything. Or if you want the yellow hazard bar, it's called optional wound bar. And if you open that up, that's where you come in here and you can see that there are some different lengths of these. So if you want to add more wounds, this yellow bar is meant to be the same height as the amount of wounds you have. So keep an eye on that when you're saving, so you haven't done that wrong. If you use that border, I don't prefer it. So we'll go back to this. Then we have the card reverse, which this folder literally is just this logo that just appeared on the bottom here, and that's for the back of the card. So if I'm making the back of the card, I do not want wounds showing, so I'm going to turn off the wounds category, and I don't want skills showing, so I'm going to turn off skills. And now I've got a nice card back. And if I wanted to use the red card back, I would just change the background again, and obviously change the header to white. So don't leave this logo on this card reverse group on if you're not doing the back of the card. You could do the back of the card without it, of course, if you don't want it. But if you tried to do that with the skills and the wounds, it's a mess, so you want to turn that off if you're doing the front of the card. Alright, let's talk about skills real quick. This is a little more complicated. There's 2 groups. There's 2 versions of skills of the skill list here. You don't want to use both at the same time. You want to pick one. So this is the newer one that doesn't have the white boxes. That's easy to see. We can add the we can use the white boxes version if we want to. So it's just toggle which one you want to use. Now, if I was to use the white box version, there's something to trim 3 edges from the text. So what I would want to do is, let's say I want to alter orange skill here, orange skill 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down to skill orange 1. I'm going to open that group, subgroup, and I'm going to double click the text box, the text thumbnail, so that I can edit the text. And I'm going to change the name of this skill, for example, steady hands. And I always capitalize most of the things in skills, even though they don't on the original one. This would just be like steady hands, and I don't like that, so I capitalize them. But so if I did this, I'm going to need to trim this white box. So I'll select the other layer inside this skill subfolder, and that is the white box layer. It also has this little arrow. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select till about a little margin from the end of the words, and just delete that part of the box. So if I was using the white box, I would want to do that because I don't need these extending out. So we're not going to use the white box version though. We are going to use the cleaner no box version, and editing the text works the exact same way. Just double click the text box for the skill you want to change, type the difference, and there you go. One other thing about the skills is there is a second blue skill for those very rare survivors that have 2 options for the blue skill. There are a few out there. If you want to make your survivor have 2 blue skill options, just toggle the skill blue 1 optional group, subgroup, and then you can edit that as usual. Turn that off because Amy doesn't have that. Then we go to the header. This is just the name. So I can change the name from Amy to maybe her full name is Amelia. Amelia. All right. It's that easy. If she had a really long name that didn't fit there, such as cardboard tube samurai, first of all, I would want to line break that. As you can see, the line height is not optimal. Should have changed that, but let's make sure our text is selected and change that. So I'm here in the character window, and I'm just going to improve the line height here, and I'm going to leave it about right there because you'll see in a minute. I'm going to change the font size. Before I do that, I want to mark where the top of this header is, because when I change the font size, it will move. So I'm going to drag down a guide to just mark the top of that. I should bring it a little bit down so it's on top. Oops. So it's on top of the shorter letters. Okay, I think that's in the same spot. Doesn't matter. Now I'm going to change the font size. Shrink it quite a bit. That looks good. Looks like I need to change the line height just a little bit. And now I want to move it up because, as you can see, it traveled quite a distance from that guide. So I'm going to move it up. And I would probably need to make the font a little smaller so it didn't get in the way of her head, but that's how I would do it. I actually don't need the line break if the font size is this small, but so that's how you change the name header. Now, if I was to use the red background, the alternate background, let's go change it to that right now. Get into the backgrounds group. Turn off the classic one, turn on the red one. Now I'm going to need to change this to white. All I have to do is here on the character name layer, just toggle visible, the eye on the effects, and that will do a color overlay of white, and you're all set. Okay, so we got Amy set up here. Oops. We're going to use the classic background, and now we're going to make Zombivore Amy really quick. All I have to do that is I'm going to come in here and put the zombivore symbol under backgrounds. I'm going to change to the zombivore art. I'm going to change the wounds to, I'm going to click zombivore 5, which is 5 wounds. There's also room for 6 extra wounds. Did I skip wounds when I went over this before? Um, anyway, so there's 5 for the zombivore, and I like this layout the best, so I'm going to leave that. I would change the skills to the zombivore skills because they're different than the survivor skills. And let's see, what else would I change? That's it. I could now save this as the zombivore version of Amy. Now if I wanted to do the back of the card, I would turn off skills and wounds, as I said before. I think I said before. And I would add the card reverse layer so we get the logo. And there you have it. So now I'm going to show you, like, really quick my process that I use when I'm putting these together. Let's re-enable skills and wounds. So I'm going to make TIFF really quick. Let's shrink Photoshop. I'm going to open up my folder where I have some of my images. I'm going to grab a dashboard. Now I'll want to see, my photo viewer is a little slow here. I'll want to see what the skills are. I'll use this as a skills for the skills reference, and you can either use your real copy of the dashboards, or you can get these exact images on the Zombicide website if you go to gallery and look at the particular character. But I'm going to open that and these 2 PNGs of TIFF in Photoshop. And the reason I did the dashboard, let me hide Amy here so I can see the background clearly, and I'm gonna import this into the character art folder because it's above the background layer, which is where I need it to be. And I'm gonna just drag in TIFF's ID card. And the reason I'm going to do that, let's make it a little bigger, is because this helps me match exactly the background color that I'm looking for TIFF. Now, to do this correctly, you'd really have to use the downloaded image. You couldn't just eyeball it. It's too subtle. So we're going to change that background tint. We're going to open the background layer. We're going to double click the adjustment layer so it opens up, and we can change the tint. So let's get kind of a red purple, a fuchsia or whatever that is. Crank the saturation way up because it looks pretty saturated. And it looks like it's a little lighter than this. Maybe it needs a little more red. A little less saturation. A little lighter. A little more saturation. And we can get really close. If I move that dashboard around, you can see that the color is pretty close. And now that I've done that, I can delete that dashboard. I don't need that anymore. And then I would bring in TIFF herself, pull in the survivor version, pull in zombivore version, and I'm still here in character art. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to enable Amy because she's my guide for the height that the character should be. So I'm going to enable Amy. You can also do this by dragging down guides, but I just enable Amy. Let's turn on TIFF's art and shrink her. So I'm going to make the feet line up, make the head line up, and then I'm going to move her so she's centered. Looks pretty good. Turn off Amy. Look at that. That's great. Now this is living version of TIFF, so I don't need to have all these wounds. So I'll come over here in wounds and turn off the zombivore, extra wounds, and change her skills, and she's pretty much done, except I need to change her name to TIFF. Now I can save that. TIFF is done. Alright, so hopefully that gives a good idea of how this worked. Sorry it went on a little long, but should be able to make whatever you need to now.